Good day everyone, I am Grace Sheila Nicer and today we're going to explore one of the most significant intellectual movements in history, the Age of Enlightenment. This period, which took place in the 17th and 18th centuries, reshaped how people viewed the world, emphasizing reason, science, and individual rights over tradition and religious authority. If there is something you know, communicate it. If there is something you don't know, search for it. The Enlightenment was deeply influenced by the scientific revolution, which introduced a new way of thinking based on reason and observation. Philosophers like René Descartes and Sir Isaac Newton laid the foundation by providing that human reason could be used to understand both nature and society. The Scientific Revolution. René Descartes, a French philosopher, mathematician, and scientist who saw man's ability to reason as the very proof of his existence. I think, therefore I am. Discourse on Method 1637. Descartes rejected all forms of intellectual authority except the conclusions of his own thought, which he then used to prove the existence of God. Sir Isaac Newton. This revolution culminated in the 17th century with the publication of Sir Isaac Newton's Principia in 1687, in which a thoroughly mechanical universe was explained through universal laws of motion. Newton, like Descartes, presented a vision of the universe whose most basic workings could be calculated and understood rationally, but which was also the work of a creator. The triumph of Newtonian science coincided with and helped to produce a fundamental intellectual change. Reason provides a unifying doctrine. Science and rational inquiry now came to be seen as the common ground which reunited men. Previously polarized into Catholic or Protestant in what the Declaration of Independence would call the pursuit of happiness. With the right use of reason, all society problems could be solved and all mankind could live prosperously and contentedly. This optimism reflected a sense of growing economic opportunity. Europe in the 18th century was richer and more populous than ever before. Steady economic growth seemed to bear out the notion that the new key of scientific method could unlock the answers not only to the physical world as Newton had done, but the theology, history, politics, and social problems as well. Using the advances made possible through rational scientific inquiry, farmers pioneered improvements in agricultural and entrepreneurs experimented with new technologies and products. The Enlightenment. How does one make mankind happy and rational and free? Their basic answer was, by discovering the underlying laws which would organize all knowledge into a clear, rational system, enabling individuals to become enlightened in the society in which they live to progress. It was a goal seen as obtainable to the people of the 18th century. Science and reason seemed to offer the key to the future, to a kind of paradise which would be realized not in the next world, as the theologians asserted, but in this world here and now. England, Hobbes and Locke. Two English intellectuals, mathematician Thomas Hobbes and philosopher John Locke, were among the first to use a scientific approach to study man and his society. Thomas Hobbes, 1588 to 1679. A mathematician, Hobbes' political theory was an effort to make politics into an exact science like geometry. Hobbes was an admirer of Galileo's ideas concerning the nature of physical world in his studies of motion. Hobbes attempted to apply Galileo's scientific principles to social theory, reasoning that only matter exists and that human behavior could be predicted by exact scientific laws. Hobbes had also been influenced by the English Civil War 1642 to 1649 when the King Charles I was executed, which he believed was evidence that men were ultimately selfish and competitive. Hobbes wrote the Leviathan in 1651. Leviathan attempted to turn politics into a science, arguing that man could be predicted with mathematical accuracy and thus regulated. According to the writing of Hobbes, men were motivated primarily by the desire for power and by fear of other men, and thus needed an all-powerful sovereign to rule over them. John Locke, 1632 to 1704. A generation later, the philosopher John Locke developed an entirely different notion of the basic nature of humankind, which he saw as innately good. Locke was a friend of Sir Isaac Newton and was influenced by Newton's description of the universe as a vast machine operating by precise, unvarying scientific laws. Locke, who witnessed the almost bloodless Glorious Revolution in England, became convinced that people could live amicably together after discovering God's law through the application of reason. In Locke's two treatises of government, 1690, he outlined a theory of public based on people's natural rights, life, liberty, and the ownership of property. France, the Philosophes. In the early 18th century, many French thinkers, known as the Philosophes, had come to admire England due to its advances in economics and its unique form of representative government. Many Philosophes built upon the ideas and analytical method employed by Locke, and attempted to develop theories of government based on rational approach to man's relationships with the society in which he lived. Philosophers held three basic tenets. First is, human society is governed by natural laws. The second one, these natural laws can be discovered by rational man. And the third one is, human society can turn from traditional authoritarian forms and progress toward a more perfect government through rational thought. Charles II, the Baron de Montesquieu, 1689 to 1755. In the first generation of French philosophers, one of the most important contributions to Enlightenment political thought was made by Montesquieu. Montesquieu came to respect the British political system of limited constitutional monarchy after a stay in England from 1729 to 1731. He also was influenced by Locke's two treatises of civil government, 1690, in which Locke articulated his support for the government which was created by the Revolution. In his masterwork, The Spirit of the Laws, published in 1748, he developed the notion that human natural and divine laws guided all things, including forms of government, and can best be discovered by empirical investigation. Voltaire, 1694 to 1778. Voltaire was famous in his younger days for his poetry and plays, but after personal troubles forced him into exile in England in 1726, he came into contact with ideas of Locke and Newton and took up weightier concerns. England became for him a model of religious and philosophical freedom and greatly affected the course of his work, culminating with the publication of his philosophical letters concerning the English nation in 1733, in which he praised the customs and institutions of English life. In his native France, Voltaire's work was seen as a direct rebuke to French mores and government, and after being condemned by local authorities, Voltaire was once again forced to flee abroad. In 1749, Frederick the Great of Prussia, who admired Voltaire's political views, invited him to come to his court in Potsdam as his royal writing teacher. After 3 years of what Voltaire saw as intellectual tyranny by the monarch, however, he fled to freer circumstances, settling for some time in Switzerland and eventually returning to Paris to a hero's welcome at the end of his life in 1778. Rousseau, 1712 to 1778. Jean-Jacques Rousseau, born a generation later, continued the philosophic tradition. He was an outspoken critic of the French social and political order, and his landmark work, The Social Contract, written in 1762, Rousseau rejected existing forms of government in favor of a community based on the choice of all its citizens and their democratic participation in every major decision. The Enlightenment's global impact. The Enlightenment was not limited to Europe, it spread worldwide. In America, thinkers like Benjamin Franklin and Thomas Jefferson used Enlightenment principles to shape the Declaration of Independence in the U.S. Constitution. The Enlightenment also inspired the French Revolution, 1789, where citizens demanded liberty, equality, and fraternity. In the long term, it led to the decline of absolute monarchies and the rise of democratic governments. The Enlightenment changed the way people viewed the world by emphasizing reason, scientific thinking, and individual rights. It helped shape modern democracy, law, and human rights. Even today, we still live with its legacy, whether in our freedoms, our government systems, or our belief in progress.